I want to invite you to take your Bibles and open them up to Revelation, the 14th chapter, as we look at verse 9. Revelation 14, verse 9. It says, "And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand." There's more than a beast to look at here. We oftentimes talk about the mark of the beast, which we will do in another week or two. But it's besides the beast, what other entity is presented here? His image. So the beast and his image, and then that's followed by the mark in the forehead or in the hand. We saw last week that the first beast, or the beast from the sea, was none other than Rome. But who or what is this image to the beast? For the answer to this, we must again return to the 13th chapter of Revelation, where these entities are first introduced. The first 10 verses of Revelation 13 give several of the 17 identifying points of this Antichrist power that we considered last week. But verse 11 continues with John beholding a second beast arise, but unlike the first beast, this one is seen coming up out of the earth. So in Revelation 13, take a look at verse 11. "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." There's quite a contrast here. Since this first beast, which arose out of the sea, represents the rise of that power in a heavily populated area, it would stand to reason that this other beast that rises from the earth would represent just the opposite. The second beast arises out of the earth, representing that this power would arise in a sparsely populated area, a very sparsely populated one. So what we're looking at here is quite important. As one power goes down, the other one begins to arise, completely different from the first one. The question is, we know who the first beast is, who or what is represented by the second beast. John beholds it coming up, as in that term, that word used there, in the phrase in the Greek, coming up like a gradual growth of a plant or something. This beast is arising slowly or gradually about the time that the first beast receives its wound, or about 1798. So who is this second beast? That's the question we're going to deal with today. Many commentators have found in this description of a beast with 2 lamb-like horns a reference to the American bison or buffalo. If you've never been close to a buffalo, they're interesting creatures. They are massive. I was coming back one night from some meetings in North Dakota, and I stopped in a rest area out in the western part of the state, and one night it was dark, and I'm coming up to go to the restroom there, and all of a sudden out of the brush comes this huge thing, about that tall. He just comes walking right by. I could have reached out and slapped him, but my good common sense told me don't do that. And I just stood still until it just walked on by me as if I wasn't even there, and then I walked on into the restroom. To give you an idea how large they can be, I was coming down out of the Badlands of North Dakota. One night, my brother-in-law and I were with me, and I'm driving, and I said to Jerome, I said, look at that foolish guy down there driving with no headlights on. And I got down to that big car with no headlights. It was a Buffalo. Just kind of walking down the middle of the road. Of course, they don't have headlights, but he looked big enough to have been a small car. So this bison or buffalo, in all probability, is what is being referred to here as a symbol to the United States because it's native to this country. And in it, we see a striking resemblance to the rising of our own nation. We see presented here America in Bible prophecy. This country is going to play such a significant role in the last days that God gave us some information before we were even a nation. Remember, John, the Revelator, did not write these words in our day and time. He wrote them more than 1,700 years before we were a country. And so the horns, the beast here has 2 horns, and on these horns are no crowns. Remember, the beast before it that came out of the sea had all these crowns, 10 crowns. So this is in contrast. This has no kingly power. The horns, symbols of, we think of horns as something kind of ominous. Well, that's true if it's on the longhorn. Us Texans can see some big horns down here. But a buffalo, for the size of the critter, he's only got little bitty horns up there. And so what we're finding here, the lamb-like horns are symbols of the youth, innocence, and gentleness, will represent the character of our government as expressed in the 2 fundamental principles upon which we as a nation were founded, and that is republicanism and Protestantism. The 2 key features of our country. As we look at our Constitution, we have a lot of people saying a lot of things about the Constitution that have probably never looked at one word in it. But the Constitution of the United States, in Article 4, Section 4, it says this: the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Right there in our Constitution. Article 6 of that says, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. And the First Amendment to the Constitution, and this is very important and very wrongly presented today, the First Amendment begins, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. You see, this concept that churches have to be completely apart from the churches and the government is not true. They are to work together. Remember when we started as a people, where were we meeting at? We didn't have these big churches. City halls, schools. I can remember the days when I held meetings in city halls, government buildings, in schools and colleges and other places. Now they say, well, you can't do that because that is an infringement upon the separation of church and state in the Constitution. That's not in the Constitution. When we are told that we cannot have the free exercise of religion, that is in opposition to our Constitution. This is what some folk are fighting right now, some other churches out there, telling these churches that they have to close. One man I referred to a few weeks ago here, he's been fighting this since it first sprang up in California. It's a bad place to be at this time. And they started rumors and lies that there was a serious outbreak of COVID in this man's church, and it's a huge church. It's got a university attached with it and everything. Come to find out, 3 people had been exposed to it, but not at church, and nobody in the church ever got the virus. But they use that to try and force this man to close, and he's refused to do it, and he's fighting it. Because they cannot make laws prohibiting the free exercise of religion, regardless of what your religion is, and it can make no law respecting the establishment of a religion. That's what your Constitution says, friends. Our country is indeed a very youthful one. You know, as I've traveled in other parts of the world, I've had people actually laugh at me and say, hey, you're just babies over there. I'm walking through buildings that are 1,000 years old or more. And I lived in some that were almost as old as this country. So you see, we are a very youthful nation that grew up from a sparsely populated area. Little statistics for your history remembrance. The first permanent English settlement was made in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. Now watch how gradual our growth is. Then we find the Mayflower finally reached our shores in 1620, 13 years later. And that's all of us that are over here at this time. And so by 1701, the population of the American colonies was only 262,000. Now notice that from 1607 to 1701, that's almost 100 years to get up to 262,000 people. Now, on top of that, by 1749, it had reached 1,045,000, and by 1775, we had grown to 2,802,000. So from 1607 to 1775, and now we've got an area almost as big as Dallas in our whole nation. And I want you to see something from Uriah Smith's book. The struggle of the American colonies for independence began in 1775. In 1776, they declared themselves a free and independent nation. In 1777, delegates from that should be 13 original states, which are New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, in Congress assembled and adopted the Articles of Confederation. Now watch. In 1783, the war of the Revolution closed with a treaty of peace with Great Britain, whereby the independence of the United States was acknowledged and territory ceded to the extent of 815,615 square miles. It would have all fit in Texas just about. Now watch. In 1778, the Constitution was framed, and on July 26, 1788, it went into effect. The United States thus began with less than 1 million square miles of territory and less than 4 million citizens. That's a gradual growth. We arose slowly. I was just checking the other day. You know when these 13 colonies finally became 48 states? When was the last 2 states added to the Union? 1959. Alaska and Hawaii came in. And before those 2 of the contingent states, here the lower 48, the last 2 of those came in together too. Which 2 were they? Oh, I love history. Arizona, Utah. So we see they came in, by the way, in 1912. So that's when we got it. So from 1607 to 1912, if my math is right at 300 years. That's a gradual growth. That's a gradual growth of this country. So As an overview, 1620, the Mayflower came to our shores. 1776, we signed the Declaration of Independence. 1789, the Bill of Rights. And so the Bill of Rights were finally adopted in 1791. So as we can see, my friends, and most vividly, the gradual growth of this youthful nation in a country of very few inhabitants and which was in no way connected to that first beast. As a matter of fact, the rise of this country was people fleeing from the first beast to a sparsely populated area. God has greatly blessed this youthful nation of ours to the extent that we are now the greatest nation in the world. However, this is what's very important. It is not because of what we are, but rather what we are to become that has caused God to include us in Bible prophecy. In order to further establish this, let's look at a few points. The power symbolized by the two-horned beast must be some nation distinct from the old world powers. Second, it must arise in the Western Hemisphere. Third, it is to be assuming the position of prominence around 1798, which is exactly what happened with this country. We also find number 4, that it must rise in a peaceful and quiet manner, not augmenting its power by expanding its territory as other nations have done by aggressive wars and successful conquest. Do you remember how we got Manhattan? A bunch of beads and trinkets. They traded, they bargained. They cheated those Indians, but the Indians got even with us. We gave them those trinkets and they gave us tobacco. And it's been killing us for centuries, and they still smoke the stuff. Point number 5, its progress must be so evident as to strike the beholder with wonder as with the perceptible growth of an animal or a plant. Just watching it grow, like those still pictures that they do, time thing, where you see these plants and these flowers and different things just grow. This is what John was beholding. The power also must exhibit before the world as an index of its character and elements of its government 2 great principles which are in themselves perfectly just, innocent, and lamb-like. And finally, it must perform its work after 1798. Now, you know, when you look back at our founding fathers, I encourage you to read any bibliographies that you can on our founding fathers, because what you're being told is not what these guys taught and believed. For example, take a look here at this famous man, Patrick Henry. We all know part of what he said, but look at what he said before he said what he said. We shall not fight alone. God presides over the destinies of nations and will raise up friends for us. The battle is not to the strong alone. Now here it comes. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, now we know this one. Give me liberty or give me death. This is what they believed. And who did they acknowledge as the one that brought us all together? God. That's why our money even says, in God we trust. That's why the 10 Commandments are on almost all federal and state courthouses. Well, they still are, because these people are not going to be able to go over there and chisel the 10 Commandments out of the Supreme Court of the United States. They will never get that far. They've had them taken down in some courthouses. Some may remember the battles in Alabama a few years back. But we believed in God. We acknowledged that we existed here because of God. Again, Benjamin Franklin. We have not hitherto once thought of humbly applying to the Father of lights to illuminate our understanding. In the beginning of the contest, this is a Revolutionary War, with Great Britain, when we were sensible to danger, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard. The more convincing proofs I see of this truth that God governs in the affairs of men. And then another one. You ever heard of a guy named George Washington? He's declared to be all kinds of bad things today. But notice what George said. It would be particularly improper to omit in the first official act my fervent supplication to the Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect, that his benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States. Did he believe in God? Did he understand that God was the reason that we existed? No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than the people of the United States. Every step by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. We ought to be no less persuaded that the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained. And then, guy that they wanted to also tear his statue down a while back, look what Abe said, Abraham Lincoln. If we could first tell where we are and whether we are tending, we could tell better what to do and how to do it. In other words, look back and know where you came from and what you're supposed to do, where you're heading, and then you'll know better of how to do what you're supposed to do en route there. So yes, friends, our nation was prophesied by the Apostle John with a rise of a country that was unlike any country that has ever existed before, and none exists like it today. I've lived in some of these other countries. There is no country like this one anywhere in the world. And we want to tear it down. We want to change it. So, as can be seen, all of the specifications are conclusively met in the history of our nation. However, even though this two-horned beast represents our great country, the major role it is to play in prophecy is yet before us. For it must exercise all of the power of the first beast. It will become a persecuting power as much as Catholicism was, to the point they will place laws to where you cannot buy or sell, and you will eventually have a death decree over your head for standing for the very things that our founding fathers believed in. It too will become a controlling, persecuting power, and it will also form an image to the first beast and will cause all the inhabitants of the earth to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. Look at it again. And he, that is the United States, had power to give life to the image, that is apostate Protestantism, of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he, the United States, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. U.S. will be instrumental in the universal implementation of the mark of the beast. It is hard to believe that a country that has been founded on the principle of religious liberty for all people will at some time in the near future betray its lamb-like appearance, and speak as a dragon. For years, my friends, religious leaders in America have been persistently working to the end of establishing and enforcing religious standards by law. Today, there are many religious entities out there working to that very end, outside of Catholicism. For example, the National Council of Churches of Christ, totaling more than 42 million people, are striving for the enforcement of religious dogmas by the states. Also, the Churches of Christ United, with a total of 25 million, unite with the National Council. And then this other one here, you've all heard of this one, the Lord's Day Alliance, with 18 million. By the way, do you know when the Lord's Day Alliance was established? 1888, to try and institute a national Sunday law here that A.T. Jones stood before Congress. And again, if you don't have those websites, if you want them, for the Blair Bill by Senator Blair, or by A.T. Jones' rebuttal of that bill before Congress, let me know. I can get you the website still yet. In addition to that, and their sole purpose is to institute national Sunday law, even today. Then we have the World Council of Churches of 400 million people. By the way, did you know that we're part of that? We deny it. But ever since B.B. Beach, this was back in the 70s, we had people from the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists sitting on this World Council of Churches. They kept lying and saying, oh, well, we're not really members of it, we're just there to support them. Well, how can you support that which is seeking to destroy the very things of God? So you can total those up and you can see how many millions of people out there, or groups, are trying to bring down God's church, God's truth. Or they are all adding their support to an ever so subtle movement that is permeating this entire country. And one day soon, very soon, I believe, the churches of America will unite not only with one another, but with the secular power to sustain a false and compromised religion. The day is coming when the state will use its power to enforce the decrees and sustain the institutions of the apostate or fallen churches. When this takes place, then America will have formed an image to the beast. So do not be deceived. The ACLU and other such organizations who claim to promote the separation of church and state concern themselves with such trivium as the nativity scene or the Ten Commandments in schools. The real enemy is ignored and left to gather strength and ground until eventually it will be too late to stop it. Their great center of interest now is to stop anybody who would speak out against homosexuality, gender changes. They're defending these people with that type of stuff. American Civil Liberties Union. These organizations need to concern themselves with the real issues of church and state, rather than attempting to give us a state with no God. But alas, they will not. So it's an overview here. What does the future hold for this country and for the whole world? The Bible predicts a coming confederacy of religions attempting to unite church and state. Those who do not receive the mark of the beast and will not be able, those who do not receive the mark of the beast will not be able to buy or sell. A coming union, church and state, followed by a death decree for those who do not bow down to it. And this prophecy too shall be fulfilled And even now, the image of the beast can be seen materializing. All of the fallen churches are looking to the Pope of Rome for instruction and guidance, while accepting the doctrines of devils and cunningly devised fables of her fornication. Have you ever noticed how many Protestant and political leaders today refer to the Pope as the Holy Father? Unbelievable. Many of them even bowing down before him, including our own leaders that have done this. The mark of the beast, however, must be enforced by government. And I want you to see something here. This came to my mind last night. Presidents who have met with the Pope. 1919, Woodrow Wilson did following the First World War. But if you notice, there were 40 years before anybody else ever went to see the guy. And Eisenhower did. Then in 1963, as should be expected, JFK did. But even he did not bow before the Pope nor kiss his ring. He refused to do it. And he was a Roman Catholic. Then in 65 and 67, Lyndon Baines Johnson did the same thing, went over to see the Pope. 1969 and 1970, Richard Nixon went to the Pope. Ford only did once in 1975, and here's the key switch now. In 1979, Carter had the Pope come to the White House. First time the papacy ever entered the White House. 79, Carter brought the Pope to the White House. Now watch, notice what we see here. We have a 60-year period, and only 9 times in 60 years did anybody meet with the Pope. But then in 1980, Carter's still in, he sees the Pope again. 1982, Reagan saw the Pope. 1984, he sent the ambassador over there. Something we had never done before. 1987, Reagan again met with the Pope twice. Then in 1989, Bush met with the Pope. So now we see in 9 years, 5 times our presidents met with the Pope. See how it's progressing. Then in 1989, Bush met again. 1991, Bush met again. 1993, Clinton met the Pope here in the U.S. 1994, he went to the Vatican. And then 95 and 99, he entertained the Pope in this country. So here we see 6 times in 9 years. Now we come down more to our time. I mean, some of us go back to much further than those, but now some that are here. 2001, 2002, 2004, 2007, Bush went to see the Pope, and 2008, twice he saw the Pope in that 1 year. That's 6 times, plus 1 funeral he went to. 2009, Obama went, 2014 and 2015, and then in 2017, Trump, in his period in office, only went the 1 time. So, 9 in 60 years and 21 in the last 40. You see how it is increasing, my friends, what it is about to culminate in. Our historic freedoms will be challenged and are even now being challenged. People want to do away with the Constitution of the United States. They're being challenged. And the Bible predicts a coming confederacy of religions in America attempting to unite church and state, and I submit to you today that that is being fulfilled before our very eyes today. The second beast has arisen, and he is beginning to speak like a dragon, and he is definitely helping the image to the beast materialize in this country, as you see all of these other supposedly Protestant churches looking to the Church of Rome. It's amazing to me. It's just, when you look at current events of things that are going on, the promotion of a couple of these in secular letters that the Pope has sent out recently, how he's traveled, we looked at this last week, to every major leader in the world. Every one of them, they all bow before him. The whole world wondered after the beast, whose names were not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Keep your eye on current events. So we've identified the beast, we've identified his image and the rise of the second beast. Next time we're going to actually be able to look at God's mark and the mark of the beast and see how essential this is in the time that we are living in right now.